Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Inspiring Leadership Podcast. And I'm delighted to have Lisa Bodell. Lisa, welcome to the Inspiring Leadership Podcast. You have had a busy life. You've written two books, Kill the Company and Why Simple Works. You've given a TED speech on
Yeah.
simplicity. In the days when TED speeches were so rare that someone who'd done a TED speech was a legend, and you are a legend. And also this talking about the future and innovation very much on our mind. We're also going to have a short dive into the implications of the presidential election as we're recording this now on our
Mm.
futures around the world and in America. This is not a political program, it's a program about inspiring leaders, but we've just seen a misleader get elected. And so we need to have a talk about that. But without further ado, tell me about how your business, Lisa, helps leaders and teams. And welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate you asking about the business. I started it 20 years ago. I never thought I would be here as an entrepreneur still for 20 years, so I feel lucky. But it's about helping people reach potential. And my way of doing that is by teaching them skills around things that they think they can't do. And that's about being creative. It's about breaking down barriers. It's about getting rid of things that are holding them back from doing that they want to do and simplifying. And one of the things I think I'm really good at is turning usual norms on their heads to get people to think differently about how they act and how they behave. And it's been inspiring to see people grow as a result of the work that we do just by allowing them to focus on themselves and get rid of the things that are holding them back. It's empowering.
I like that. I know, and I think there's so much in the world of work that we do and in our lives where we get caught up in the clutter of everything
Mm.
else. Last night, my wife Lee and I were we brought in a new base to the bed in our bedroom, so we had some help with that. But also, we were completely cleaning out Lee's office upstairs, moving furniture around, and she's created this amazingly clear space now for her work and her recording. She's doing her MBA in her spare time, and it's cleared her mind. So this whole
I knew
idea
it.
of uh, of
I,
of clearing your mind is very important.
I was going to ask you how she feels because it's everyone says, well, what does it look like? And my first reaction is, how does it feel?
Yeah.
Because you're doing it subconsciously for a reason. And I think when you start seeing somebody organize something, they're trying to gain control. They
Yes.
feel out of control. That's what I do. So that's my bias there. But if something's too cluttered and then I get overwhelmed, the first thing I do is I clear my space because I'm clearing my head. And I think that's really important because the result of that is peace.
Mm.
And I really like that. So I'm sure now that she has her clean studio, she's going to be a lot more creative. A lot more
Yes.
ideas will come to her because she's going to have time to think. It's kind of ironic, right? Cleaning
No,
can make you.
it makes an awful lot of sense, and various books have been written on it, which I've read. But I do
100%.
know when I do a spring clean and I sort stuff out, and things are away in their place, or a whole lot of stuff gets thrown out. It's actually very liberating. People hang on to clutter. It's very liberating. We just get rid of stuff, take it to the tip, or put it in the bin, and it's gone.
But you know what? People push back on that because they feel you wonder why people don't do it more often, right? And I think that's the society has made us feel that having more is valuable. Doing more, having more is valuable. But that makes it harder to focus. I mean, I like to say that the beauty of Marie Kondo,
Yeah,
right?
Marie
The
Kondo. Yeah,
closet organizer that everyone knows, wasn't that she organized everything in your closet. It's that she got rid of the things that you didn't need. So what remained, you could actually appreciate and have joy. And
yeah,
I laugh because I tell leaders, the goal isn't to look at your inbox and say, does this email bring you joy? Because the answer is going to be no. But it's to think about the systems and the other things in place that are just unplanned and unnecessary that are holding you back or frankly causing you stress,
mm,
taking you away from the potential that you have. And
yeah.
that's powerful. So clean your studio is the moral of this story, I think.
I think so. But I mean, even to be um, more personal and more severe, one of my CEO clients, has got a terminal illness, and he's okay, but it will get worse and worse, and he will die much sooner than he ever thought he was going to do.
Yeah.
And in what was actually quite a tearful meeting and conversation, and a big, unusual for us both, a big man hug at the end, was
Oh,
that I said to him, "What are you going to stop doing now that the tape that we have, that piece of tape you chop down until you got the number of years left, your piece of tape, your piece of ribbon has just got a lot shorter where the fingers are almost together. It's that short. So
devastating.
your asset is time. And if it was
There is.
money, you wouldn't go out into the street with your bag open and to strangers and saying, help yourself, take my money, take my
Take
money.
my money.
But you
Right.
do it with your time. You just like, oh, complete strangers take your time.
This is interesting because I talk a lot about this when I talk about simplicity, which is, you know, there's a few fallacies. We think being organized is being simplified, and it's not, right? It's not about organizing things it's getting rid of. And our relationship with time has to change because it's a non-renewable asset. You'll never get it back. We get so mad when people steal our money. Why don't we get mad when people steal our time?
Mm,
And all of a sudden, when you don't have it anymore, you realize, oh my God, what have I done?
mm,
And that's one of the things actually we teach people is to not be, if you're trying to grab time back, people say you're being selfish with your time. You're not being selfish, you're being protective. It's different. Like we put this guilt around taking back your time. And I think that that's not the case. If
no.
time is the most precious asset we have, why are we want to not be spending it, but investing it. And we've got to be more selfish. I actually was on the phone yesterday with the ex chief people officer from Kickstarter.
Hmm.
And what was so interesting is when they moved to a 4-day work week, they were so worried that people were going to take advantage of it, just try and not work anymore. And because they were still paid 100% for 80% of the time. And she said, what we did is we actually we made people have a different relationship with time, and we called it time crime. And we made it a culture where meetings are a last resort. If people are taking your time, they are taking you away from the thing you want to spend that fifth day that you now have back doing, like being with your kids, walking your dogs, volunteering. So think about that. Should get mad if somebody steals your time, and then it makes you think about how you use others. And I think that's the important difference, right? It's not just about your time, it's everybody's time.
I love that. And let's just build on that. It just you triggered with me. One of the things I love to help people to have more effective meetings so that
Ah,
like what is the
good luck.
purpose of the meeting? If there's no purpose, if ask the other person, what is the purpose of the meeting? If you can't give me a clear purpose, I'm not coming. All right? Don't just send some other poor bastard. Just don't
Mhm.
go. No one
So,
goes from your team.
well, that's a big thing right now. As leaders say this a lot, and we're going to talk about this, which is, um, I think that's really empowering. In fact, at Pfizer, they did this because we did a big simplicity program with them. And Albert, who was the CEO, he told people to say no to meetings, right? And people were inspired by that, right? Who doesn't want to say no to meetings? Well, the problem was a month later, he realized, because you can look at the analytics, right, on your Outlook and everything, everyone was still going to meetings. And he asked his chief of staff, what the hell's going on? And he said, well, you still go to every meeting. So unless the boss says no, right? Because they're the ones that really have the power to say no, nobody else will do it out of fear. And I think that's an important message, actually, which is we do want to take back our time, but we have to send the message as leaders, that we were talking about this, shortening that what you say and what you do gap.
Mhm.
And the key thing people need to do as leaders and people want that work for leaders is they need people to model the behaviors that they're actually espousing.
Yeah.
So I want you to say no to meetings, so I better not go to meetings,
Yeah.
right? I better kill meetings. I better audit meetings and say, take them off the books. And we do that with my team, and it is so inspiring to do. Getting
Oh,
back is
it,
inspiring.
it's really great. And my question after that first question about purpose is like, why are all these people at this meeting? Oh, well, FOMO. They fear of missing out. And
So
I go,
wait,
look,
I would clarify something though. It's interesting. I was talking about this with some people, some psychotherapists, and I said, what is it about people that what they say they want and then they do the opposite? Right? I mean, we can talk about this in terms of work. We can talk about this in terms of elections. Um, I think what the problem is not fear of missing out, it's fear of being irrelevant.
mm,
That's one of the big issues is that what drives people is they want at the end of the day, they want to be relevant. So they want to be included. That's why they feel obligated. They don't know, oh, I want to be included. And FOMO is part of that. But the end result is I want to feel like I matter.
hmm hmm
So I don't want to say no to that meeting if it's going to make me look good or give me prominence. Because
yeah. And that touches into another one, which is when I look at the leaders around a meeting, let's say I work with the CEO and his top team, I say to them all, you know, how much of your day do you spend in meeting? and the polling, and
Yeah, it's
many
not
of them.
inspiring when you hear the answer.
No, many of them
Yeah.
go 50%, 60%, 70%, 80% of their week is in meetings, back-to-back
It is.
meetings. So
It
I
is.
go, so you're a leader. Where do you practice your leadership? They
They
go,
don't.
or we don't, or we might do it in meetings. So are your meetings really inspiring leadership meetings?
I
And they
don't
go,
buy it.
and they,
I
and they
don't
don't,
buy it.
they go, oh, so look, where do you do your day job? And they go, well, after we finish the meetings. So in the
That
evenings and at the weekends. And so I said,
when I'm burned
that is
out
the
and
problem.
tired,
That's the problem.
that is part of the problem. Well, it's interesting because I'll ask people when I give talks on simplicity, and it's my talks aren't about being more efficient, right? Because at some point you can't spreadsheet your way out of it because there's
Hmm.
not enough time. That's the issue. But it's about managing people for their potential and their stopping burnout, right? You can't be engaged at night and on the weekends all the time. You're going to be burned out. So we've got to stop these ridiculous meetings and all the things. That what has happened as a result of all what I say is the work of work, right? When I ask people when I speak on stage, what do you spend your day doing? It's always meetings and emails.
Hmm.
And people are drowning in the work of work. They don't have time to think. That's why we want them to simplify. But the issue that's happening is that we are not leading, we are executing our calendars. And that's a very bit different way. This gets back to that concept of time. People, they're either getting through their to-do list or they are just trying to check things off on their Outlook. And at the end of the day, if somebody says to you, what'd you spend your day doing? Typically, the first image that pops up in their head is their Outlook calendar.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I did this at 9 and this at 10 and this, that's not leading, that's managing. So
Yeah.
until we really, to your point, question the need for these things and get rid of them, like get okay with subtraction as much as addition. It's not a loss. You didn't fail by getting rid of a meeting or putting a rule in place that didn't work. You're actually just weeding the garden to create more space to grow.
Exactly.
And
And go on, sorry, you go.
when we get leaders to think that way, that's going to be transformative because they are so bogged down that they're having a hard time leading themselves. And that's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. And this comes back to I got on my wall the sort of, my the focus for my life, family, health, and the order of my priorities for the year. When something comes in, I look at that on the wall and I go, where does this fit into that? And they go, it doesn't. Like somebody, they're going to become a coach, and oh, can I chat to you, John? I want to become a coach, and can I hear about how you coach? And I go, my heart says I'd love to help you. My head says no. And
Sure.
so here, read this book or read that book or whatever it is. But I'm afraid I've got to be with my family or I've got to be with my clients. And I just, I'll be honest with you, I'm just going to say no. And sometimes they're offended, but you know what? You've got to be, because I've got this finite amount of time. And I
That's
don't know
it.
how long I've got left to live. But having lost my brother David, not lost, I think people use the term lost. My brother David died, and
I'm
he
sorry.
died within 10 weeks of metastatic cancer.
Oh
And
my
he
God.
is the age I am now. And he had lots of plans, but he's not here anymore. And he wouldn't be thinking, oh, I wonder if I should do a call with someone about them becoming a coach. Is that the best use of my time, or will I spend it with my brother for the last conversation I'm going to have with him?
That's
And
exactly.
it's the latter. And so I do think we need a bit of a wake up call. And I have the Memento Mori calendar on my. Have you come across this?
Oh,
It's the
I
four
think
thousand
about this.
weeks. The
Oh,
4,000 weeks. All right, and I've got not many left. And so, how many Christmases have I got? Maybe I've got 10 Christmases. Maybe I've got 20 Christmases. I don't know. But is this the best use of my
of my,
time? If I've got a finite amount of time, why am I saying yes to all these pointless meetings, which have no purpose and no decision is going to be made, but we're just going to update each other? It's a waste of time.
it's a waste of time. Yeah, and most of the updates, if I had the amount of people that just were, as they like to say, Ghostbusters and just stole my time, it's infuriating. It is. The older you get, it's infuriating because it's not right. They don't have a right to do that. You can't, taking away things from people is not a good look. But people feel very comfortable to do it. So I think that kind of gets back to moral character and really having what, the old saying, you need people that live by the compass, not the clock. And enough people aren't either smart enough or driven enough or focused enough to realize what they really want. So they just kind of, it's amazing how many people just float through life without a purpose.
Well, I do love your quote there, and it's such a well-known one. But of course, you're speaking to someone who, with my wife Lee, we designed the Inspiring Leadership Compass, which is about
Yes.
the way to live your life and be fully integrated rather than disintegrated, where bits of your
Yeah.
life aren't together. And I think you say living by the clock is not the way to live. You know, the
But
map
most
is
people do.
the map is confusing. It's out of date. It hasn't been updated. The one thing in the world of GPS, the old silver compass still works, even if the
It still
satellites get taken out by Elon Musk.
Huh, be ready. Yes, I do feel that, especially too, the older you get or the more city miles you have, as I like to say, it feels that, people talk a good game, but very few people go through life with original thought and purpose and a sense of the legacy that they want to leave behind.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why time just gets so wasted. You use the story of your brother. I lost my brother as well. And
Mm.
you feel that if I could get that time
I'm
back, how
sorry.
would I do it differently? And how would I have listened to myself more versus others? That to me is one of the big differences is that we spend a lot of time listening to others and we've got to develop a better sense of like kind of like that gut feeling and being able and having the boldness to go along with it.
Uh,
Because people
the
people vote against themselves a lot.
correct, and the head, heart, gut is head, heart, gut, and wallet is the four quadrants. A friend of mine says when you're thinking about a job, what does the head say? What does the heart? What does the gut? And what does the wallet say? And the head is 89 billion neurons. Of course, it's the main brain. The heart has got 100,000 neurons. No, 40,000. And the gut, gastrointestinal tract, has 100 million. Now, those are much smaller, but they're mini brains. And they're communicating to the main brain more than the main brain is communicating to them. And
That's
people don't
right.
understand that the actual gastrointestinal tract picks things up. That you have they say you have a gut instinct. It is actually linked to the neurons in it giving you signals
100%.
back.
Yeah, it's very interesting too now with all the research that's coming out around the focus on gut health, and
Mm.
it's directly related. Like go
Mm.
with your gut, and I think we would be better off if more often we did go with our gut.
I
That's
think
what they
so. Yeah.
Yeah, they talk about again, voting against yourself. You've got to go with your gut, but it's hard, right? It's easy for people that are leaders to say that. People that aren't, it's even though they have a gut and they want to be able to do something different, how do they do that when they don't have the power to say no? And I get asked that a lot, because they're like, yeah, it sounds good, but you're the boss.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. So I'll say maybe you can't say no, but you can say yes if. And this gets back to boundaries. So, if your boss wants you to do something, you could say yes if I can reorganize my priorities, if I can do something later. You've got to engage people in the conversation around if you're asking me to do something, this isn't about me doing something for you. This has got to be a fair trade.
Mm.
So I think that's something interesting that can be empowering for people that aren't in the boss seat to try and put some kind of boundaries or at least guardrails around how they work. So they're not just, they're workers, not slaves. I'm sorry to say it like that, but I think that that's just another phrase to get people more comfortable to getting to know.
Yeah. So, this is a good time for us to talk about a couple of inspiring leaders before we move on to misleaders and
Okay,
talk about the American election.
please.
Let's talk firstly about a couple of inspiring leaders that you'd like to appreciate and what qualities, because this program is all about inspiring leadership, but also we will need to be aware of the misleaders and the vampires who take away, suck out the life from us. But you talked about Ken and Chris. Tell us about Ken and Chris.
I really like, you were asking me, right, about leaders, and it was interesting, right, that I had to really think about it. And I think that's a topic something we should circle back to. But the first people that popped into my mind, one was Ken Frazier, who was the CEO at Merck. And I met him when I was doing a leadership series, training all his top leaders in Philadelphia. And he was there and he gave a very inspiring speech to people around, the importance of being a human leader, about leading with integrity, about challenging the status quo, like fighting for what you want. And that was interesting because his background was he was a leader. I mean, he was also a lawyer. So people perceived him as, oh boy, a lawyer running the company. He's just going to be all about rules and regulations and bottlenecks. And he was actually quite the opposite. So he surprised people with his character. That's what gets to me is like what he said and what he did. His character was very good, so people followed him along.
Mm.
And interestingly, I was there to help him and his team kill stupid rules and kill
Mm.
his company. And it was a like a proactive way to challenge the status quo. And he, as a leader, sent the signal, this is what I expect from you, and we're actually going to do it right now. So I really admired him. He had a lot of integrity.
Hmm.
He had good character and he was authentic and he did what he said. So that to me was wonderful. The other person, Chris Barton, who's a relatively new friend of mine over the past several years. Chris is the founder of Shazam, the
Hmm.
music app, he eventually sold to Apple for $500 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had the pleasure of actually being with him. He and Wozniak, Steve
All right.
Wozniak, all were speaking in Azerbaijan. This was a few years ago, and of all places in Baku. And we had dinner together, and Chris had never met Steve. And
Wow.
so it's so interesting. He's like, "Hi, I'm Chris Barton. I sold my company to your company." And it was the fifth largest acquisition ever for Apple. That's not what's important. What was important to me is that you would never know that talking to Chris.
Yeah.
He is a humble, good human. He overcame not just difficulties as an entrepreneur, but growing up with dyslexia. And that became a superpower, as he said. Like being able to look at things differently. He was always told what he wasn't versus what he could be. And he fought hard. He overcame barriers. He was humble. And I really look at that in terms of good character. So those are the
Mm.
role models for me, people that do what they say, and they do it in a way that has, I believe, humility.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about people of good character. I was lucky enough to have Admiral Bill McRaven
Yes.
as a guest, and he wrote an article just before the presidential election about George Washington and how all the values that he stood for and built America on, Trump is doing exactly the opposite to him. But of course,
Mhm.
they still went ahead and voted for him. And you were just saying to me some interesting facts about this election, where in Biden had 81 million people voting for him. Harris had only 67 million. Trump, first time round, had how many? And how many did he have this time?
Oh,
Roughly.
I can't remember. It was something like 74, and this time only 71. I mean, it wasn't the popular vote he won.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this was the biggest election we've ever had. A lot of people, it turns out, didn't vote, and they certainly shifted away from voting for her to him.
Yeah.
And this to me is that character gap. What you say, I am not a fan of him. And I won't be because I don't believe in his values. I will not vote for somebody whose platform is taking away from people
Mm.
versus fighting for people. And I believe he's going to be detrimental. He's a bad person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think the implications are great. But what he had going for him is he had a message. He said what people wanted to hear.
Hmm.
People that weren't particularly educated or wanting to find out more, right? They just believe what they're told, went along with it. And what makes people upset about that is how can someone of that character be put into such an important office?
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It was a difficult moment to have to talk to your kids about you'll get through it, all these things, but you have this bad feeling in your gut, right? About what's going to happen despite what you're being told.
Yeah. And when from the UK, my colleagues and I looking at this situation, we've had Boris Johnson and his lies and deceits, and he was luckily found out and removed, but he still thinks he can come back. And probably now, even more than ever, he and Liz
Now he'll
Truss,
be
who's
emboldened.
he and
Yeah.
Liz Truss, along with others who are populist, will think, we'll come back, and then you've got all the, as we were talking about, the sort of demagogues who, and the three Ps: populist, post-truth, and polarizing. Whether it be from Xi Jinping in China and Erdogan in Turkey and
How many? You've got Netanyahu in
Maduro
Israel.
in Venezuela, and so
Right.
on,
Mhm.
Orban in Hungary. It
Mhm.
seems to be the way a lot of countries are going. But I am seriously worried for the future of the world, we've already got various wars going. We've got North Korean troops fighting the Ukrainians for the Russians in Russia. We've got Europe
Israel.
who's not, yeah, Israel. We've got Europe who's not ready to be deserted by America, who are going to have to look after their own thing. And Poland is burlesque, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. When Russia gets given by Trump, who seems to have, they seem to have some hold on him, Putin does, apart from the fact he loves autocrats, that he'll give them Ukraine rather than helping Ukraine survive. And that's not just giving Ukraine, it's giving all the countries on the eastern border part of
That's
this
correct.
greater Russia, and Taiwan will go to China. So it's deeply worrying. What do you think went on that causes a man with so little character to be voted for in the popular vote by so many people?
When you appeal to people that their only outlet is rage and anger, and you tell them what they want to hear, they're not particularly educated, and you're not looking to educate them. They don't have a long view of things. They just want to have a good message. They want to be able to, I mean, their worst instincts are now, it's okay to have them come out. That's very appealing to people. Very appealing. They don't have to think. They didn't have to do any deep work. It was too hard to vote for Harris because, if you're talking about policies, they don't want to hear about policies.
Mm.
They want to have somebody just say to them, I got it, even if what he's going to do is going to be the exact opposite. People aren't thinkers. I can guarantee you that a large majority of the people that voted for him have no idea what's happening on a global stage. And for
Mm.
my husband, it's one of the things I always talk about, and he talks about when we speak, he speaks on stage too, is one of the best things you can do is get out and see the world. My goal is to go to every country in the world, and I think it is especially important for Americans to do it. They have to get out and see the world because I taught my children the difference between weird and different. I don't know if I've told you this
No,
story.
tell me.
When I first took my son, and he's 22, he's been to almost 50 countries, and my daughter 40 probably, which isn't bad.
Mm,
It's very
very
good
good.
for an American, I'll tell you that. And we've been
What
out,
is the statistic about the number of Americans who have passports and who actually leave America?
I don't even want to
I
know.
think it's something like about 15% or something.
It could be very low. And then I'll say to people, because that's a privilege, right, to be able to travel like that. But even so, you should get out and see the country. The country's huge, right? And it's incredibly diverse.
Mm.
So getting out and understanding others is really important. So what I said to my son Jack when he was young, he's probably about, I don't know, 8, 9. I had an opportunity to go to Spain for work. We were going to be in Madrid and Barcelona. And he said, can I come? And I said, yes. And he was very nervous because he said, Mom, I don't speak, my Spanish isn't very good. And I said, honey, a lot of people will speak English, but don't worry. It's okay. Everyone, like people will help. And when he got there, something interesting happened. He met a ton of people. We were at tables at dinner with people speaking 13 different languages. It was very inspiring. I mean, what a great thing. And we would travel around, and I caught Jack saying, when he would see something he wasn't familiar with, or he would see a food he had never tried, he would pull me aside and say, Mom, that's really weird. And I said, why do you think it's weird? And he said, because that's not how we do it. And I said, well, just so you know, when people here see you do things the way you do them, they think you're weird.
Mm.
And of course, his reaction was, no, no, I'm not weird. And I said, if you're going to travel with Mom, you have to use the word different because weird is right and wrong. Different is perspective. And
Yeah,
that's what was lost in the election. We don't care about perspective. We care about right and wrong. And
yeah,
that's why things are so polarized. It's going to be very hard to bridge a gap between the people that voted for Trump and the people that did not,
yeah,
because it feels moral. It feels right versus wrong.
yeah. And you were also in our discussion before, we were talking about the huge impact of social media and putting money behind things from people like Elon Musk, who was, getting people to try and win some lottery by voting Republican. Um, there's been so much corruption of social media by North Korea, by Russia, by Iran, and people don't know that they're being worked over. Their
Well, and
minds are
they'll
being played with.
say, no, not me. It's not that, it's everyone else, not me. I couldn't possibly be duped. I'm too smart for that.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I think we won't make this whole thing political, but what I would leave it with is that we have a dearth of inspiring leaders among our politicians around the world. We have lost that ability to inspire through high integrity service to your country rather than to yourself. And these are misleaders. And these are expiring leaders who will actually kill a lot of people through their bad policies and their selfishness.
That's correct. And going back to when you said it's, I love talking with you because you always make me think. The last time we talked, I think we could have gone on for 4 hours. Um, you asked me who I thought was an inspiring leader, and everyone seems to be able to, rattle off 4 or 5 people. And I have to tell you, my origin story is I have had very few inspiring leaders around me, very few. I can rattle off so many bad bosses to the point of where you're like, that is shocking that that person was in a leadership position. But we all have those stories. Like we're always supposed to have reference these inspiring leaders, but I think it really says something when it's so hard to come up with one. And to me, that shows the character, right? Of not just what is a good leader, but what's rewarded as a
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that being a good person is rewarded. It's results, it's ruthless results.
Well, isn't it the sort of that kind of saying that nice people come last? And I don't believe in that. And I do believe people can live a good life and be an inspiring leader. But
I agree.
let's go to the origin story, Lisa. I think the work you're doing now as a futurist and an innovator, and the books you've written, and the TED talk you've given, what has shaped all that? Where did it come from? Who brought
Mm.
you up? Who influenced you, both good and bad? As you say, you met very few inspiring leaders on the way, but who were your primary caregivers, and what kind of people shaped you? Because of course they say, and I've done a lot of work on myself, looking back on childhood up to the age of 13, it's hugely influential.
Mm.
Sometimes if we have bad leaders, we decide to do the opposite. And I saw some bullies and I saw some people who did things I thought, I will not be like that. I'll do
Absolutely.
the opposite. But also, you may have had one or two who actually gave you some hope and some inspiration.
Yeah.
Tell us
I
about
had a
your
couple,
story.
well, and I had a couple of teachers. That's what really saved me. But so many things to say about that. My story, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Michigan then in Illinois. And so it was a very, I don't know, middle class upbringing. But I had a father who was quite narcissistic. He was just not a good guy. And he was chronically unemployed and had a rageful temper. And so I never remember my father having a job, not once. And my mother, too, also had mental illness. She had borderline personality disorder, and she was largely disengaged from my brother and I. And so at a very young age, I learned that I was on my own.
Hmm.
And so starting at the age of 7, I started, I would clean the house, I would make the dinners, I would take care of my brother, because everything was incredibly erratic and unplanned. And it was I always say it was like living in a hurricane waiting for a dumpster fire. So I really learned to be independent and to figure it out on my own. So as a result of that, I became incredibly organized and driven. And it served me well because when I got into after school and I got to work, my career, my bosses loved me because I worked so hard. I worked so hard. God, I made them look good. And I was organized. I got things done. I could take on more of my capacity, but I got burned out.
Hmm.
And I realized, especially as a woman, it is literally impossible to do it all. Right. And I would listen to all these gurus. This gets back to who you think is a real leader, what they say and what they do. No matter how many Harvard Business Review articles and productivity gurus and whatever I would listen to, I would try and take their advice, right? I would color code my calendars. I would multitask. I would plan on the weekends. I couldn't spreadsheet my way out of it. And I just got to the point where I was depressed because I thought, what is wrong with me? And that's when I started to realize, it's not me, it's the work. I've got to start really building into things and listening to my gut. I can't keep following these leaders that just steal my time and want more, more, more. I've got to think about what's good for me. And I've got to really simplify and change what I'm doing. That's when I
Hmm.
started my own business because I had to take control of my time. And doing what I was doing was just like when I was growing up, I was just giving and managing everyone's chaos. And I didn't want to do that anymore. So I became very skeptical at a young age of leaders.
Mm,
So that was part of my kind of origin story. And then what kind of tipped me over the edge is later, my brother, he committed suicide. He killed himself.
I'm so sorry.
That's please, it was a long time ago, and there were lots of things there. He also had mental illness, but it was the watching out for leaders and people that have character that look out for others, not just for themselves. And I think it also, one, it taught me about the importance of listening to your gut, because I saw these things coming. The importance of mental health and taking care of that. You don't just burn yourself out for others. And who you surround yourself with matters. So
Mm,
that's a lot there in terms of my upbringing. And I know people have very similar stories. A lot of people have difficult upbringings, but who you surround yourself with, whether it's your parents, but eventually your bosses and your friends, they shape your perception of the world, your outer perception, but they also shape your inner perception about who you are. And we go back to the election here. I don't want to have somebody tell me what my life is going to be like and what I need to do and what I need to give up. I want to drive that myself. So I spend a lot of time thinking about who I'm surrounded with, whether it's my employees, my friends, and people that want to suck my time.
mm.
I'm I'm much choosier about that now that those things happen to me in my life.
Wow. Well, look, thank you for sharing that because it's a tough one. And as you say, don't belittle it. It must have been pretty damn horrendous. And it's given you phenomenal drive to do what is important and do the right things rather than just do things right. Do less of the wrong things and and actually influence others' lives because they need that kind of help and they don't want to burn out. And I know too many people, even perhaps a couple of my own children, two of my three girls, maybe all three of the girls, who will work themselves very, very hard with the calendars and the schedules and the color coding and
All the
try
things, yeah.
try and of course they're about to have children or just got children.
Oh,
They are going to drive themselves very hard. Is it more of a female character than a male one? I mean, we bluff our way, most blokes, but I mean, is it this search of perfection? I know you can't generalize, everybody's different, but do you see this more among your female leaders?
my bias is yes, but I think it's everybody has an issue with
I
the
have it.
time.
I have it. I have it.
Yeah, the time management, because the people that want to take on more are the ones that get burned out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
What's
that,
the famous quote? Give a job to a busy person. Well, no,
yeah, you
don't
want
do
something to
that.
get done, give it to a busy person because they're organized, they can get it done. I don't know, maybe lazy people have have figured it out.
No, no, I want to just quickly build on that one. Rommel, Owen Rommel. Four types
Yes.
of leaders, he said. There are lazy and stupid leaders. There are stupid and hardworking leaders. There are lazy and bright leaders, and there are bright and hardworking leaders. He said,
Mhm.
take the stupid and hardworking leaders. I mean, he actually said shoot them, but get rid of them. And take the really bright and lazy ones because they'll get the job done, but then they want to be with their family and do some sport and health and fitness, and they'll
That's
they'll they'll get it done quickly, but won't spend time there. It's the ones that take you miles in the wrong direction because they're working so hard, but they're stupid. They're doing the wrong things. And this is back to the misleaders like Trump and Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and all the rest that we've got.
That's
people
distracting.
people give them or they're hungry for it. They're narcissists, so they want the power, they want the status. Others clamor around them. They want to be popular with them. They want to be in with the bully in the school playground, the one who
That's right.
throws their weight around. So they all try and suck up to them. No one will take on Trump in the Republican Party now. He's just got superpower. He is the king. And so no one
Here.
speaks out and goes, this is wrong. Or when they do, there has been one or two of them, he destroys them. And he's going to come after those who've stood up to him
That's the play.
and try and take them out. The playbook is take out anybody who stands up to you.
Well, I like to say that people have going back to character, there's morals of conviction and there's morals of convenience. And I think more people have morals of convenience.
Oh, I like that.
And I know that I have morals of conviction. And people can argue that they don't agree with them, but when I think I'm helping others and doing the greater good, I'm going to stand by that. I have to look at myself in the mirror, right, every morning. And I'll tell you this one story. It was interesting because everyone says, they'll do the right thing until they're put in the situation. And most people only get the situations in small ways, right? But when you have it in a big way, I'll tell you quickly one that happened to me, that's when you prove your character. And I was asked to speak at a conference that it was going to be broadcast to 100,000 people, and you'd be in a stadium. It was in Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? This is the gut, right? My agent said, do you want to do it? It's a great opportunity to sell all these books. People had spoken there in the past before it got a little bit more radicalized. You'll hear about this, like Oprah, Michelle Obama, et cetera. And I thought, okay, I'm vetting it. Good people had been there. All right. These people then wanted to fly out in their private jet and vet me. And I said, well, I'll be right in their neighborhood, but they can come see the speech here. No, 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 they want to fly to see you. And I thought, well, that's odd. That's a waste of money. Turns out this was a group that was associated with big megachurch, which to me is just like, that is off the rails for me.
Mm.
I don't do things in politics. I don't do it in religion. Long story long, things progressed. And I said, I want to back out of this. I don't think this is a good positioning for me. No, it's not directly with the church. It's a different arm. It's about building leaders. Turns out the pastor got me too'd. He was a serial harasser, all this stuff. I immediately backed out. As someone who does so much in women's rights and DEI, et cetera, I said, I'm out. And the only other person to back out was Denzel Washington. And we were quoted in the Times and the Tribune, et cetera. And people came after us like you would not believe.
Really?
Oh,
Really?
yeah. What are you doing? This isn't right. You're hurting the church, et cetera. And what I was surprised at wasn't the people coming after me. What I was surprised at is how people persisted in me wanting to do it, how dumb they thought I was for backing out. But the people that replaced me, that I knew personally, that had no problem because it was about money and exposure and power to take my place. And what I said to my agent was, I said, all these people talk, when you go out and you have drinks with them, they talk about morals of conviction, but it's really just convenience.
Yeah.
They don't really stand their ground. So that was a proud moment, actually. It's got me a lot more work on the back end with my agent because he said, I was so proud of you of being one of the few people that actually said no.
Well done on that because in one of the psychometrics I do with leaders, there's one area which is irreproachability, and there's a score on that which is quite low, and they go, well, "Why is my score so low?" And I say, "Well, perhaps I could make light of this with a humorous comment from a comedian. I'll think of his name in a moment." And he said, "You criticize me. I have got values over here, and if you don't like those values." Over here, I've got some other values that you can have. And
Exactly.
he was making light of it. But the point is, you've got to know if you don't know what someone will stand for, they'll fall for anything. And it's
That's exactly.
this sense of what do you stand for? What will you do? What will you be known for, and what will you not be associated with? So I'm delighted that you've hung on to that, and I think it's very important. Let's have a think on
Well,
a couple of final points before we've got about 15 minutes left. So that's really great. Um, your book, Kill the Company and Why Simple Works. Tell us about the backgrounds to that, because it's you're big into transformational leadership, curiosity, strategic imagination, overcoming resistance to change, and balancing the big and small changes. I love those kind of themes. But tell us about Kill the Company and Why Simple Works, because I think people should get the books.
I think that it's interesting, like going back now that you know about a little bit more of my origin story. My thing is about like overcoming odds, right? Rising, like kind of like a phoenix. You've got to overcome things. How do you solve it? Because I hate people that talk and they don't do it. So Kill the Company came from a frustration where leaders had brought us in, right? This is the see-do gap, brought us in to talk about change and really motivate their teams to change. And it was very obvious to me when I came in, I was just going to give a talk about change with my futurists that were on my team. I was giving this speech, and about 30 minutes into it, it was very obvious that none of these people were buying what I said. I mean, they were bored. And I pulled the senior leader aside and said, what's going on? We're here to like inspire change and get them activated. I said, no one's engaged. And they said, the truth is, the culture here is no one believes, everyone wants to do it, but no one believes they can actually affect it. So, they're just kind of complacent.
Mm.
And I said, well, do I have free reign to shake them up? And I just pulled it out of where. I pulled it out of my ass. I just said, well, what if we killed your company? And everyone said, what? The leader kind of freaked out. But I said, what if you're so stuck in who you are, then let's try to figure out how to put you out of business.
Wow.
And I told them to become their competitors. And actually, you get kind of this out of company experience. And you're supposed to, your job in the next hour is to take your company down. I want to hear what sucks, what isn't working, who we've got to get rid of, what we should divest, what are all the policies, how you're going to change pricing, what products suck. I want it. It's all on the table. You can't get fired. There's no bad answers. And it was stunning what they came up with. So kill the company to me was
So just
this.
staying with that one,
We've got to, I'm so tired of the,
Lisa, in that, I love that. I'm just so excited by this. You got them to be almost thinking about killing their company. What would you do to kill a company? Who would you remove who might keep the company going? What would you change to make it so unaffordable that you couldn't make any money? Was that it? Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
And what's so interesting about it is you set aside an hour and you've got to get there's a process behind all of this. And we organize the thoughts and we theme them and then we have them, take those weaknesses and strengthen them or put them back on their competition. There's all this stuff. But the whole thing that is interesting to me is how people are so engaged, which really speaks to the culture. How they always want more time because there's so much to say. Um, we often don't give people a path to say what's wrong. They're only supposed to politically say what's right. And how people really do want to solve problems. They just don't know how.
Mm.
So we've got to stop just telling people to come up with ideas and innovate and all this stuff. We've got to help give them a way to get rid of their problems. And that's what was really enlightening to them. Kind of like going back to your wife cleaning your studio. She got rid of what just wasn't working for her, right?
Mm.
And that's what we need to give leaders by killing the company. So to me, it was born out of frustration. I'm so tired of going into these companies and teach me how to innovate. I'm not going to teach you how to innovate because your people don't care. They don't give a shit because they know nothing's going to happen with the ideas and they don't have the time to do it. So can we just do something else first? Can we be a little bit more provocative? Only the most provocative leaders will let us do that. But those to me are the leaders that I love.
Yeah. And
So that's
being,
kill the.
I love it. And being provocative, and being someone who looks at the future of the world of work. Now we've got Trump in a world of uncertainty, but yet what he's going to do because he's going to do what he said he's going to do. So it's uncertain in some ways, but it's not uncertain. Don't be confused. He's going to do what he said he's going to do. So in that
Well,
world, going forward in the next 2 or 3 years, what do you think is going to happen? What's work going to be like? What's the future hold?
well, I mean, a couple of things. I don't know if you're going to be able to challenge things. I mean, in general, I think society, there's going to be a lot more fear. They're not going to be able to challenge things like they thought they would. I mean, look at government. It's just going to be more of like a dictatorship. So people aren't going to be able to challenge things. And I think that's going to trickle to work. Fear is going to become more prominent. What's the problem with that is fear already is the number one human behavior, right? It's what stops us from saying no to meetings or questioning our boss or challenging things. And if fear goes up, trust goes down. So that's what concerns me is the inverse relationship between fear and trust. And it's designed that way. Because then if nobody questions me as a leader, wow, that's pretty free reign. I can do what I want. It's a pretty good agenda, right? So
Mm.
what's going to happen in the world of work? That's a pretty extreme thing, right? But I think there's going to be less regulations on corporations. At least I know that in the United States. So they're going to be able to get away with a lot more. I think that benefits, DEI and inclusion, that's going to go out the window.
Mhm.
So progress made there is going to be set back. I think that workers' rights are going to go down. So if you thought it wasn't good now, I mean, get ready. Prices are going to go up for your health care. We have a real issue with that here in the United States and your benefits. And I think people are they're going to get what they voted for. I think
Mhm.
that's what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty, as you say, a fear-based world. And I love the work of Stephen Covey to try and give us a little bit of a lift. And not just the father who 50 years ago inspired me, but I'm looking at Trust and Inspire by Stephen M.R. Covey, who we had on the podcast. A lovely, lovely man. And this
Wonderful.
I this idea of not the command and control and the fear, but the trusting people, giving them that opportunity to to make things come alive and elevate and empower them, that still is very powerful, I think. But people don't want to do that. I've got one of my leaders, and he goes, "Yeah, yeah, that's all fluff, that fluffy stuff, Jonathan. But in the meantime, we got to hit the numbers, and I'm going to make essentially saying I'm going to pin them down. I'm going to drive the numbers, 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 numbers. Numbers don't lie. The numbers are everything.
Mhm.
And if they're fearful, yeah, just get over with it. If you don't like it, you
Get
can
over
go.
it.
Get over
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Well, that's not motivating. Well, it's the other thing too is, in times of uncertainty, people put more, there's more, as I say, handcuffs, not guardrails. So they're going to put in more processes, more policies, more things. I think it's going to be a little bit more complex. I don't think there's going to be as much innovation. I would like to be more hopeful for you, but it's waiting to be seen. Waiting, but good leaders, even in times like this, if they're really good, they're not going to change, right? They're still going to be authentic. They're going to have character. They're going to lead by example. They're going to role model behaviors. They're going to instill trust in people and include them in the conversation. That's, to me, it's if you want to know, if you want to have hope, you look for those kinds of people. That's what you want.
yeah, and we more than ever we need those inspiring leaders. I've just been listening to Bob Chapman, the CEO and
Mm.
chairman of Barry Wehmiller. Do you know Bob in your travels? Have you ever come across
Know
him?
of, know of,
Yeah,
yes.
but like everybody matters, and that's not the message you're getting from Trump. It's like my people matter, but your people don't.
That's,
It's just
yeah,
like, but if everybody does matter, rather than the old Jack Welch approach of firing the bottom 10%, you actually look for ways of bringing on everybody because it's not just about a job. It's how they then go home inspired by the work they do, which is meaningful and has purpose, and therefore they're not so abusive to their families at home and not, the life that you were going through, that people have something of purpose and
it's all related.
they care for their families. Yeah.
Yeah, that's purpose. So is it a top-down approach or is it an inclusive approach? So I think that's going to be really interesting is how do we redefine leadership in a very uncertain and in a world where rights are being taken away versus given. So I think that's going to be it's going to be you asked about the future of work, that's not the future of the world, but I think there's going to be a lot of pressure and uncertainty on leaders of how do I lead through this?
Yeah.
People are going to be looking to leaders not just for kind of business support, but I think personal support.
Yeah. And I think back to the best leaders in 2008 when there was the financial crash. And in one or two of the organizations I went into, the leader hid away in his office or her office and just
Mm.
was waiting for things to settle down so they could announce something. But it was moving so fast, it was going down so badly.
Yeah,
The good leaders came out onto the balcony. They went, guys, gather in. Okay, look, it's a very uncertain time. What I do know is this: the approach we're going to take is this. The principles are these three things. So live by these principles in these uncertain times. But your
hmm,
personal example does matter. And I'll be there with you and I'll take you through it. And those were the inspiring leaders. So I think in this time of the fear and the lack of trust that will happen, the three P's of polarization, post-truth, and populism, there is more than ever the need for good leaders. And I think about your upbringing and the experiences that you had where there was examples of poor leadership. While I had a tough life in my own way, I was very lucky in joining the army at 18 that I met some really inspiring leaders who
oh, that's excellent.
personally led by example. And they now, even now in my 60s, I can think back to what would Richard Dannett do? What would so and so do? John Griffin do? People like this who became quasi father figures to me because
That's great.
they did the right thing, even if
Yeah.
it cost them, even if they were going to get fired for it, they would do the right thing.
That even now that to me is that's why when people say, you know what, I need a mentor. You know what, I think there's a difference between a mentor and a sponsor. We've all heard this.
Yeah,
It's especially true for women, by the way. Like I don't need any more mentors. I need a sponsor. I need someone who's going to stick up for me when something's powerful, and be able to support me, someone who can make the change because I can't. And so I think that's really important for leaders going forward is like, don't think of it. It's easy to say things as a mentor. That's what mentors do. I can say the right thing, but a sponsor actually, they go out of their way to help you.
I
You
like them.
got it.
I
Yeah.
like them. Yeah, being there and having their back. And this is what some of the military guys I had have been my sponsors all the way through to this
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And if I'm in doubt, I haven't got a father, but I would go to one of those three really inspiring leaders, John Griffin, um, Richard Dannett, or even John Stoker, and say, look, what would you do in this situation? Doesn't mean they're perfect. They have their own flaws, but they are honest enough to be vulnerable rather than to lie and say, I'm perfect.
Yeah.
Now, we
Mm.
are ready now for your introduction to introduce yourself, tell us the work you do, and share your top tip. And that will round it off very nicely, Lisa. So over to you.
Well, so let me just focus on the top tip. Is that
Just
where I should?
share who you are and the work you do, and then focus on the top tip. Yeah.
The work we were talking before, and the work we do is we really want to inspire people to get rid of what's holding them back so they can reach the potential, or at least have the time to think about what is that potential? Like, what is the legacy you want to lead? And that to me is very important. That's why I started my business, because I wanted to have control over who I was and the legacy I wanted to leave, which was helping others and create that for those people. And one of the things that people ask us is all the time, right? How do I do it myself? And at the end of the day, this goes back to our conversation on character, is that modeling matters. And what I mean by that is modeling behavior. So when in doubt, if you think that something doesn't feel right, do the thing that feels right to you. Model the behavior that you would want to have modeled to you. So I think that that's probably the best thing we can do. And then you'll never go wrong. You'll never have regret. And I think that's an important thing when you look back on your life. I always did the thing that I thought was right. And that's why modeling matters.
Modeling does matter. And Lisa Bodell, thank you very much for being on the Inspiring Leadership podcast. It was very stimulating. You have so many fabulous ideas. Continue to make a difference in a world that needs inspiring leadership more than ever now and will do in the future. Thank you for your
Thank,
time.
thank you so much, Jonathan.